Hello everybody, my name is Todd Taylor. I am a publisher of Gorski Books, which Williams Bookstore is gracious enough to put a little display here, which is awesome. I also do, the main publisher for Razorcake fanzine. I actually have 3 copies in my backpack if anybody's interested of our 10-year anniversary, which was last month, 2 months ago. I'm going to read a 2-part chapter. I'm going to read the first part now, and we'll have Bradley and Todd see. It's from a forthcoming novel, and basically the only thing you really need to know about the novel is that it's taking place in Needles, California. It's really hot. It's the mid-90s, early 90s. And the main character's name is Murtaugh, and the guy that wants him dead is Goat. We'll go from there. Thin tubular clouds stretched like balloons, yet to be made into animals. Intense heat, average for that time of year, kept almost everyone behind glass, inside stucco, near air conditioners. The streets were free of people. The sidewalks were empty as Murtaugh walked back from work. It was just him, the cracks in the sidewalk, and the dusted black widow spider webs spun close to the cinder block walls. The walls shaded the lower half of Murtaugh's body as he walked. Cars passed, windows rolled up. When cars yielded at stop signs, small puddles of water dripped from their air conditioning condensers. Some of the puddles were about as big as quarters. They lasted a couple of seconds on the hot ground before they evaporated. Murtaugh was using the walk home time to contemplate the 2 words, infinitely looping, that hadn't easily evaporated from his mind. Insects inside. Insects inside. It's kind of the premise of the entire novel. The lead character thinks that he has insects inside of his blood. A dark silvery insect flew closely past Murtaugh's head. It clicked and buzzed loudly. Murtaugh swatted at it as the insect dive-bombed around him. Murtaugh bent down to retie a shoelace. "Hey, dead man!" Goat yelled through his rolled-up window, cruising by at a moderate 30 miles per hour. The car's exhaust loud enough to mute much of what Goat had yelled. Goat was in a good mood. The abuse he spooned out was light and casual. His teeth glistened. He smiled at Murtaugh. Murtaugh, caught by surprise, stood up after tying his shoe, wondering if he'd really heard Goat yell at him over his own garbled thoughts. As the GTO passed, Murtaugh's thoughts turned into a black cluster of flies. He raised his hand, waved, and muttered, "Yeah, I know you hate me. Thanks for saying hi," figuring the Goat really didn't want to get out of his car and into the oppressive heat. The episode resembled that of 2 people who didn't like one another and with personalities that didn't mesh, passing on a hot day and continuing on their respective ways. But something didn't quite sit right with Goat. He sensed either a loss of fear, which equated to a loss of respect, or something, an exploitable weakness, like Murtaugh was butter left out on the counter. Then something clicked. This was the day to spread Murtaugh over the sidewalk. Goat figured that there were at least 4 more hours of light left in the day, more than enough for a good chase and a beating. Subdivisions are built for isolation. Subdivisions of the American West were built with cars in mind. Wide streets limbed with cinder block walls at least 6 feet tall, so people couldn't peer into backyards, couldn't stare into front rooms. Subdivisions are what realtors call a safe place to raise children. Palm Street wasn't a major thoroughfare, yet it was 4 lanes, 2 west, 2 east. The middle was a wide median that broke when the other streets intersected with Palm. Alongside the road were generous sidewalks. The sidewalk Murtaugh walked on was flanked on the right by a gray cinder block wall, standing higher than Murtaugh. The GTO had glided past Murtaugh. Goat turned on his signal, took a left at the first break in the median in the divided street, patiently waited for an oncoming car to pass, doubled back at another break in the median, and came from behind Murtaugh. Low, slow, and easy. The GTO appeared to hunker an inch off the ground, prowling before the lunge. Murtaugh continued walking, eyes fixed on the ground, back still aching. In his mind, a cloudy mist of insecticide was sprayed into the clotting swarm of black-bodied insects. And Goat was in that swarm, as small as the rest of the other insects, and he was getting swallowed in the middle of that mess. Goat was so tiny, so controllable in there, the outside world slipped further away from Murtaugh's thoughts. Then the unmistakable squeak of tires as Goat punched the gas 100 feet behind Murtaugh and let his prey know that he was hunting. It instantly stuck exclamation points on both sides of Murtaugh's squiggling thoughts. "Oh shit!" Murtaugh thought incredibly loudly. Murtaugh didn't think as he ran and jumped to scramble up the cinder block wall, reasoning the Goat didn't want to damage his car by attempting to ram him against the wall. Small bits of compressed concrete filled Murtaugh's fingernails as he clawed atop the wall. He flailed a bit. He glanced back. In the abusive summer light, the glistening chrome mouth of the car's bumper dryly chuckled at Murtaugh's efforts. Kneeling, Murtaugh steadied himself and looked back at the advancing car. His eyes locked onto Goat's. Goat stared back with easy hatred. Murtaugh stood up, wobbly at first, began to run on top of the 10-inch wide cinder block wall, arms out for balance. Goat laughed. He took his foot off the accelerator and coasted, pacing slightly behind Murtaugh. He rolled down his window and stuck his head out. "What's next? What are you going to do? You can't go anywhere," Goat taunted. Murtaugh kept running and paid close attention to his feet. He hadn't quite figured out where he was running to, what his plan was. He was just buying some time. The car from above looked like a manta ray. And Goat was mirthful. He just filled up his car. He tapped the fuel gauge with immense satisfaction. Keeping Murtaugh in his rearview mirror, he shot ahead of Murtaugh and looped around again, taking his time at the break in the median, casually coasting until he was once again parallel with Murtaugh. He enjoyed watching Murtaugh running in a ridiculously straight line from several different angles. It was like he was making Murtaugh do a stupid trick. To Murtaugh's left was the street, 4 wide exposed lanes with little chance of escape. On his right, backyards flickered by, one lot at a time, like frames in a slideshow. Decaying exercise equipment. Desert rotting personal watercraft. Dog running and barking. Goat absolutely loved when he could pin down his anger, stick his chin to its collarbone, knee its arms down to its side, and then hit it again and again with a closed fist. It was exactly what he planned to do to Murtaugh. Anger was the fuel. Spilt blood would be evidence of a job well done. Goat cranked up his stereo. Moments before, he had stolen a copy of Black Sabbath, Black Sabbath. The tape filled his ears. Goat sang along to the song. Pardon me. Feel your body falling to its knees. His tongue stuck out like a wet knife blade. His head banged back and forth. Joyous tattooed ghouls with bloody axes filled Goat's mind, and he smiled broadly. Left arm draped over the steering wheel, Goat caught a small spider dangling off his rearview mirror with his right hand. The spider was on a short silk tether that was being trembled by the rattle of the engine. Sleeping while of remorse, Goat sang directly to the spider dangling under his fingertips. Murtaugh started to puff. He continued running. He didn't want to get beat up. Goat's thoughts meandered to the color he wanted to leave Murtaugh's skin. He wanted to beat Murtaugh pea green, dark purple, black, red. He wanted to make dents in his chest, crack some ribs. He wanted to split seams in Murtaugh's skull. Turn your body to a corpse, Goat sang along, as he pulled and shortened the silk strand reeling out of the spider. Its body was tiny. Goat flicked the spider across the dash. It landed and scrambled onto the knob of the glove box. Murtaugh stopped. He was at near the continuous half-mile cinder block wall that defined the north side of the subdivision. He realized that he'd either have to backtrack or drop off where the wall ended and try to outrun the car across Lily Hill, a vulnerable stretch of street. Goat came to a coasting stop behind him. In neutral, he tapped the gas. Wall of sleep is lying broken. Sun shines in, you have awoken. Goat methodically thumped his thumbs on the steering wheel to the beat. This album's so fucking good, he said to himself as he punched the console. Murtaugh swiveled on the balls of his feet, arms fully extended. His mind was feverish. All he had visualized up to then were padlocked doors, 2 high fences, barbed wire. Then a faded blueprint came into view, a vague escape plan. Murtaugh began backtracking, running the opposite direction atop the cinder block wall, instead of dropping down and crossing the street. This provided 2 immediate advantages. First, Goat would have to tail him from across the street on the far side of the median, unless he just hit reverse or was willing to drive the wrong way down the street. Second, Murtaugh figured if he jumped off the wall and disappeared into a yard in the middle of the block, he'd have about a minute head start. Goat would have to get to the break in the median, double back, shoot down an intersecting street, bang around the block. Goat clutched the steering wheel in a small fit when he realized that Murtaugh had jumped off the wall and disappeared from sight. The GTO lifted off the ground and ripped at the asphalt. The car lurched. Goat fulminated. After jumping down from the wall, Murtaugh lost his balance, fell, got to his feet, sprinted across a dry, crispy back lawn, and negotiated over a wrought iron fence that burned his hands. The GTO careened around the first turn in the median in a controlled power slide. The subdivision that Murtaugh ran into was an uncomplicated labyrinth. Mostly a grid, some winding streets, a couple of entrances and exits. Subdivisions made by the same developer had the effect of déjà vu, of repeated sameness miles apart from one another, and Murtaugh used this to his advantage. Wanting to stay off the streets and sidewalks, he found an unlocked gate, jogged between 2 houses, into a backyard, climbed up another cinder block wall roughly the same height as the first, and continued to run due south. The wall was a spine between backyards on either side. Murtaugh heard the V8 engine closing in on behind him. Each cylinder ignition snapped at him, filling him with an itchy paranoia. Murtaugh swatted his head, banged his ears, and continued running. Goat then remembered that he had a bat in the car. He reached under the passenger seat and produced it. He absent-mindedly traced the veins of its hardwood maple with his free hand. Goat banged around the block, easing off the gas. He scanned the neighborhood for movement or an open door. Everything was still. Where'd that buttery bastard go? Goat asked the spider, dangling from the glove box. Part 2 after Bradley and Todd C.
Bradley and Todd are going to play some songs. Matt and other Todd will read some stories, and then some more music and some more stories until we're out of words and out of songs and all. Sound good? Yeah?
Yay! That's fun.